In the beginning, there was earth. Paradise. An unspoiled sanctuary of beauty. The only place in the known universe capable of creating and sustaining life. Before humans came along, the earth was in perfect harmony, right? Well, not quite. The earth has always been home to chaos and violence, constantly changing through what can be a brutal process of trial and error. We are a product of this evolution. The first and only species so far capable of replicating nature's uncanny power of creation and destruction. Over time, we have literally changed the face of the earth. So much so that the harm we've done seems irreversible.
We're in this unique situation of environmental crisis that is astounding.
We stand at a critical point in our history. Already at the beginning of the year, we are facing the largest humanitarian crisis since the creation of the United Nations.
Storms get stronger and more destructive. Watch the water splash off the city. This is global warming.
I felt so scared, sorry.
Despair can be paralyzing.
We are told that the earth is dying and we must save it. It's a heroic notion, but it hasn't been very effective in changing our behavior so far. Nor is it true. The earth isn't in danger. Not yet. It has survived through far worse than this, but it is changing.
The government has announced the emergency oil reserves have fallen to less than 250 million barrels.
By dark ocean, it's the beginning of a sudden major change. Most
nutritionists will tell you that bad food and a lack of exercise are the main contributors to obesity. In Europe, that's going to happen in the wake of what's going on. Like you at the moment, looking prosecution from the U.S.
Today, 775 million adults are illiterate. 61 million children are not even in primary school, and 75 million young people are out of work. The next 20 years will see the world's population reach 8 billion. And for the first time in human history, most will not live in poverty. 60% of the world's population will live in big cities. That's 1.5 billion more than now. The world's middle class will increase from 1 to 3 billion. They'll become the most important economic and social sector in most countries and drive a significantly higher demand for consumer goods and services.
We're in the middle of really profound change, no question about it.
The most criticized scene in the movie An Inconvenient Truth was showing that the combination of sea level rise and storm surge would flood the 9/11 memorial site, and people said, what a terrible exaggeration.
Hurricane Sandy slammed into New York City last night, flooding the World Trade Center site.
Consequences of our voracious lives are spiraling out of control. Are we pushing the natural world towards a crisis? Where do we go from here?
In the next few decades, we need to do something unprecedented. Achieve a sustainable existence on Earth. But how do we do it? We can start by understanding how we got to this point. 20,000 years ago, humankind consisted of less than 1 million hunter-gatherers across the globe. We lived within the resources on offer, in balance with nature. A strategy that could theoretically last forever. But it wasn't an easy life. Nature determined our survival. We used our unique minds to challenge that reality. We learnt how to tame the wild, get more from the environment. Our population boomed, as did our demands. Every time a new problem arose, we solved it, altering Earth's entire surface in the process. And now we have changed the world so profoundly, scientists have decided that Earth has entered a new phase of its existence. Welcome to the Anthropocene, the age of humans. The tables have turned. We now determine nature's survival. The planet is ours. There's just one problem. We're now totally out of balance with nature. And unless we get our balance back, this age of humans is due to be short-lived. How do we create a future in which both people and nature can thrive?
There really is the potential to cooperate.
This is like the last effort of a particular phase of civilization. It's its last gasp, really, and I often use the metaphor of the caterpillar becoming the butterfly, because the caterpillar crunches its way through the ecosystem. It's very destructive. It eats 300 times its weight in a day until it's so bloated that it hangs itself up and goes to sleep, and its skin turns into a hardened chrysalis. And then in its body you get these imaginal cells, biologists actually call them that, forming within the caterpillar's body. The caterpillar's body then actually becomes a nutritive soup for those cells. But what's important about that metaphor is that the old and the new coexist for a while. And it's the job of the caterpillar to preserve its life. It's a desperate government that we have now trying to control oil in the Middle East and wanting now to promote nuclear energy and all these things that they know better, but they have to play out the role of protecting themselves. It's their job. And if you love butterflies, you don't go around stepping on caterpillars. So we can't hate them. It doesn't do any good. But if you want alternative energy, you don't ask an oil economy administration to produce it for you. We have to produce it. We imaginal cells have to show that it's cheaper, more efficient, and more effective.
What is human nature? Are we humans what the elite would have us believe? Stupid, greedy creatures who, if left to our own devices, would devolve into violence and chaos, and so for our own good must be ruled over by a self-appointed elite? Or are we naturally caring and creative? I believe when people are healthy and have what we need to survive, we can create a world based on integrity, freedom, and compassion. A world where everyone can thrive. Which of these two views will shape our future? That's our choice now.
Essential interdependence of all humankind. That we are human only through the humanity of other human beings.
We can speak about the essential goodness of all human beings. We've been through rough times. The bad, the evil, doesn't have the last word. It's ultimately the goodness and laughter and joy and caring and compassion. Those are what are going to prevail in the end.
Help make our planet a more peaceful, healthy, and equitable place to live.
The path of forgiveness instead of revenge. The path of reconciliation instead of retribution.
I believe that in the end, it is kindness and generous accommodation that are the catalysts for real change.
Societies, civilizations, in some sense, are like our bodies. If there's something systemically wrong, it's manifesting all over the place, in all our organs, and that seems to be what's going on in our world at the moment.
The system is failing all around us.
Our infrastructure is falling apart. Our jails are full and can't hold more people. Our young people are burdened with $1 trillion in student debt.
We're in a heap of trouble.
When the temperature of the earth is starting to rise, that's a very bad sign. Our earth is running a fever, and it's running it because it's sick in many ways.
In a country like the United States, the fact that anywhere from 45 to 50 million people are hungry, this is a problem.
We can't go on like this. We can't keep moving toward climate catastrophe, nuclear war, persistence of inequality, poverty, famine.
There is a systems problem. These are not one-off issues. They are interconnected, and we have to look at the system as a whole.
For consumers and producers, justice is an opportunity to be seized. When trade is fair, when both buyer and seller benefit, everybody can prosper and earn a decent living. How can there be justice and equity between people whose only tools are their hands and those who harvest their crops with a machine and state subsidies? Let's be responsible consumers. Think about what we buy. It's too late to be a pessimist. I've seen agriculture on a human scale. It can feed the whole planet. if meat production doesn't take the food out of people's mouths. I have seen fishermen who take care of what they catch and care for the riches of the ocean. I have seen houses producing their own energy. 5,000 people live in the world's first ever eco-friendly district in Freiburg, Germany. Other cities partner the project. Mumbai is the 1,000th to join them. The governments of New Zealand, Iceland, Austria, Sweden, and other nations have made the development of renewable energy sources a top priority. I know that 80% of the energy we consume comes from fossil energy sources. Every week, 2 new coal-fired generating plants are built in China alone. But I have also seen, in Denmark, a prototype of a coal-fired plant that releases its carbon into the soil rather than the air. A solution for the future? Nobody knows yet. I have seen in Iceland an electricity plant powered by the Earth's heat, geothermal power. I have seen a sea snake lying on the swell to absorb the energy of the waves and produce electricity. I have seen wind farms off the coast of Denmark that produce 20% of the country's electricity. The USA, China, India, Germany, and Spain are the biggest investors in renewable energy. They have already created over 2.5 million jobs. Where on earth doesn't the wind blow? I have seen desert expanses baking in the sun. Everything on Earth is linked, and the Earth is linked to the sun, its original energy source. Can humans not imitate plants and capture its energy? In 1 hour, the sun gives the Earth the same amount of energy as that consumed by all humanity in 1 year. As long as the Earth exists, the sun's energy will be inexhaustible. All we have to do is stop drilling the earth and start looking to the sky. All we have to do is learn to cultivate the sun. All these experiments are only examples, but they testify to a new awareness. They lay down markers for a new human adventure based on moderation, intelligence, and sharing.
We have got to convince people that given current trends, we're headed for disaster. That's the bad news. This new knowledge gives us the possibility of acting in ways that create a brilliant future for all of us. So we need, as environmentalists, as good economists, as just concerned citizens, to begin to discern that a brighter future comes from making change.
It's too late to be a pessimist. Worldwide, 4 children out of 5 attend school. Never has learning been given to so many human beings. Everyone, from richest to poorest, can make a contribution. Lesotho, one of the world's poorest countries, is proportionally the one that invests most in its people's education. Qatar, one of the world's richest states, has opened its doors to the best universities. Culture, education, research, and innovation are inexhaustible resources. In the face of misery and suffering, millions of NGOs prove that solidarity between peoples is stronger than the selfishness of nations. In Bangladesh, a man thought the unthinkable and founded a bank that lends only to the poor. In 30 years, it has changed the lives of 150 million people. Antarctica is a continent with immense natural resources that no country can claim for itself, a natural reserve devoted to peace and science. A treaty signed by 49 states has made it a treasure shared by all humanity. It's too late to be a pessimist. Governments have acted to protect nearly 2% of the world's territorial waters. It's not much, but it's 2 times more than 10 years ago. The first natural parks were created just over a century ago. They cover over 13% of the continents. They create spaces where human activity is in step with the preservation of species, soils, and landscapes. This harmony between humans and nature can become the rule, no longer the exception. In the United States, New York has realized that nature does for us. These forests and lakes supply all the drinking water the city needs. In South Korea, the forests have been devastated by war. Thanks to a national reforestation program, They once more cover 65% of the country. More than 75% of paper is recycled. Costa Rica has made a choice between military spending and the conservation of its lands. The country no longer has an army. It prefers to devote its resources to education, ecotourism, and the protection of its primary forest. Gabon is one of the world's leading producers of wood. It enforces selective logging, not more than 1 tree every hectare. Its forests are one of the country's most important economic resources, but they have the time to regenerate. Programs exist that guarantee sustainable forest management. They must become mandatory.
Our economic system is underpinned by the services of nature and the stability and resilience it provides. But flaws in the finance system have helped tarnish our natural world. Our finance sector has unwittingly bankrolled the destruction of the very natural systems it relies upon, putting ourselves on a trajectory to devastate the natural world and our way of life forever. But our future doesn't have to be this way. Our finance system needs systemic change.
The public needs you to take the lead and needs you to be brave.
Do we invest money in the practices that take us deeper into this crisis, or in the solutions that could get us out of it?
We need to be aspirational and be clear about the vision of the world that we want.
What is cooperatively owned businesses?
Sustainable energy.
State-owned banks.
Urban gardening, urban farming.
These small successes taken together are a proof of concept that this can happen on a larger scale.
We're compelled to search for alternatives, not just analytically, but in how we live and what we do, how we organize our daily lives. And that has tremendous potential.
Our actions and our imagination have to match the magnitude of this problem.
We have to get out of our comfort zone. We must think with courage.
All bets are off in terms of our previous thinking. Our ways of thinking about the economy and our ways of thinking about politics have proven an abject and utter failure. The good news is we have no choice but to adopt revolutionary thinking. I like
people who cared about these things, really joined together to do something about them. Anything is possible.
The biggest worry for me is that we don't try, is that we don't push for what we know is right, for what we know is possible.
We can actually do better. We can build a better system that's not impossible.
There is no longer any doubt that we will have to rethink the way we live on our planet. We already keep track of what we spend and buy at home, at work, in factories and in society. But what we don't do is keep track of the planet's resources that are being consumed more quickly than they can be regenerated. Instead, we need to rethink how to reduce, reuse, recycle, and eventually resource our way of living. Then it will be possible for 7 billion people, or even 9, to live on one planet.
We know that demand for resources is continuing to grow, so we will need to do a lot more than simply using our resources more efficiently. We'll need to bring together many solutions and ideas, such as maximizing the environmental and health benefits of investments in clean technology, appreciating the free services that nature provides to us, and recognizing the importance of social and cultural values. But perhaps most critical is that people will need to see that by changing the way they use resources, they will also improve other aspects of their lives.
Given the situation in which we currently find ourselves, perhaps the 4 most powerful steps we can take are bringing population into balance with the earth and other life forms, reducing our energy consumption, supporting local organic foods that use little or no fossil fuels, and making our voices heard to awaken our politicians to these issues.
It turns out when you look carefully at it, you find that the one variable
that determines whether population explodes or not is the power of women in a culture.
If you made sure that there was justice and economic opportunity for people in the poorest countries, people would choose to have fewer children there. And if people were consuming less here and were sharing more of what they had with the rest of the world, you actually do begin to get the outcomes that both address concerns around population as well as environmental sustainability.
We are, without doubt, the most inventive and powerful creature on the planet. We're so successful, we've hijacked the whole world for our own ends.
We have even extended our scope into space. This is a pivotal time in the Earth's history. Look at the planet as satellites do, and we see that we have become a global force ourselves. Seen from space, humankind's influence can be considered a natural process. The gases released by ships and aircraft, cars and power stations are caused by an animal the Earth itself produced. But there is one key difference. Unlike volcanism, the movements of the ocean's currents, or the oxygen released from forests and plankton blooms, we have a choice of what we do.
Authority knows best is the slogan that guides our conventional wisdom. We, meanwhile, are left to mind our own business, go on with our lives, and attempt to live happily ever after, as long as we conform to the norms forced upon us. From cradle to grave, we are led to follow the guidelines of what authority defines as a state-of-the-art system, one in which success seems to begin and end within the running wheel of education, career performance, debt management, and retirement. A vibrant economy is the ultimate priority of our global hierarchy, while a vibrant planet, the respect of all life forms, healthy foods, peaceful ways, and conscious actions seem to be a mere subject of conversation, often turned into a few fundraising campaigns with very little or no impact at all.
Can we do it?
It's crunch time at the climate change conference in Paris.
Still some really tough negotiations going on.
What would it take to shift to renewables?
I'm talking about breaking the impasse. Virtually every nation in the entire world agreed to get to zero greenhouse emissions. It is unprecedented.
Since the Paris Accord was signed in 2015, banks globally have continued to invest $1.9 trillion into the fossil fuel industry, and that's despite knowing where that's leading and what the consequences are.
But we must not give up hope, for there is a path, and it's a clear one.
Mass extinction has happened on Earth before, and because of our actions, it is on the verge of happening again. Which means changing our actions moving forward is the one thing that can prevent our extinction.
We must produce and consume sustainably. Fight desertification and flooding. Be more resilient, more adaptive. Support sustainable cities and human settlements. We must conserve all that we love, protect our oceans. We can guard that which gives us life.
How do we create a future in which both people and nature can thrive? We open our eyes to this moment in history. Think on a planetary scale. Embrace the challenge we face. And do something we humans are very good at. Change the world.
Our best chance for survival lies in continuing to imitate nature, drawing inspiration from its awesome power. Most of us understand intellectually that we are connected to each other and our fate is tied to our planet. But now that we have the means and knowledge to effect change, we have to act. We've already found many of the answers we need in the natural world. The process of changing the Earth back into a place that will support us is well underway. Progress is being made, and there is reason to be optimistic.
As societies develop, something is happening that has never happened before. People are having fewer children. Globally, since the year 2000, the number of people under 16 years old has hardly changed. The main reason our population is still rising is because people are living longer. If this continues, our population may finally stop growing by the turn of the century. By investing in education and women's rights and raising people out of poverty, we could bring about peak human even sooner. This changes everything. It gives us the opportunity we need to regain our balance. The plan for our planet is remarkably simple. Reduce our impact by making sure that everything we do, we can do forever.
The more we do, the more the Earth will help rebuild and remake itself. What is needed is a concerted effort. This isn't a challenge that just a few countries or world leaders can fix on their own. It's going to take all of us, through actions large and small.
It's a challenge. We can do it collectively.
Being a responsible citizen starts with voting. That's one of those basic things that everyone's just got to do. But it gets way more exciting and fun when we put our unique skills and interests to work alongside thousands of others. I know that changing a whole economic system is a huge challenge. It's not easy to see a clear path from where we are today to where we need to go. And there's no 10 simple things we can do without leaving our couches. Faith is taking the first step, even though you don't see the whole staircase.
We know that the solutions are there today. We all have the power to change. So what are we waiting for?
It's time to put America first. That includes a promise to cancel billions in climate change spending. It's supposed to be 70 degrees today. It's freezing here. Speaking of global warming, we need some global warming. Our plan will end the EPA.
What is the system that humanizes us? What is the system that opens up our imagination of possibilities of cooperation?
Nothing is more important right now than to discuss how can we bring about this change.
Changing the goal of the entire economy is a huge task. Of course, we can't do it all at once. But when we focus on game-changing solutions, we gradually make it possible for a new game to be played. To do that, we have to be able to tell the difference between a game-changing solution or just a new way to play that old game of more. Whenever I'm asked to join in on a solution, I want to know if it's transformational. Will it change the goal? To figure it out, I use the word goal. I want to know that it, G, gives people more power, taking power back from corporations to build democracy. O, opens people's eyes to the truth that once basic needs are met, happiness and well-being don't come from buying more stuff, but from our communities, our health, and a sense of purpose. A, accounts for all the costs it creates, including the toll it takes on people and the planet. In other words, it internalizes costs instead of externalizing them, as most businesses do today. L lessens the enormous wealth gap between those who can't even meet their basic needs and those who consume way more than their fair share. When I see a solution that does all that, or can be redesigned to, I'm in. And how about the new trend of collaborative consumption, formerly known as sharing? Sharing may sound like the theme of a Barney song, but think about it. It's a huge challenge to the old game. It gets us off the treadmill of more, conserves resources, gives people access to stuff they otherwise couldn't afford, and builds community. What's it look like? Bike share programs in major cities. Online platforms that let us share everything from our cars to our homes to camping gear. In my town, the public library system lends out tools. There's just no reason that every house needs its own power drill, creme brulee torch, scanner, wheelbarrow, bike pump when we can share. As transformational solutions like these gain traction, we will reach a tipping point if we keep focused on the new goal of better.
Ultimately, I foresee for this century a tenfold improvement of resource productivity.
We need to decouple the rate of economic growth from the rate of resource use. If the two continue to climb together, we're going to hit natural limits.
Of course, everything has to be based on life cycle analysis, where you compare the advantages or possible disadvantages of recycling versus use of primary resources.
If we're to live more sustainably, we will need to do a lot more than simply use our resources efficiently. It is time for the world to come together to change the way we live on this planet.
The next generation would be justified in looking back at us and asking, what were you thinking? Couldn't you hear what the scientists were saying? Couldn't you hear what Mother Nature was screaming at you? This movement is in the tradition of every great movement that has advanced humankind.
We're not going to recognize it. We don't want to discuss it.
It is right to save humanity. It is wrong to pollute this earth. It is right to give hope to the future generation. Don't let anybody tell you that we're going to get on rocket ships and live on Mars.